Over the years, many game genres have come and gone, making their way through the popularity cycle as the industry's evolved over time. Whether it be the addictive arcades of the 80s, the platforming boom of the industry after Mario, the consistent growth of sports games in the 2000s, or the short-lived Kinect phase after Nintendo broke every sales chart in the book, the games industry is a fluid one, and one genre in particular has seen a major downswing over the last decade, a genre that many today grew up playing. Licensed games. Games that take the stories of all the characters we love from books and movies and TV shows and put us in control of them, with, let's say, varying outcomes. Before we jump into the video though, it'd really be appreciated if you could hit like, and if you're new here, make sure to subscribe with notifications turned on because YouTube doesn't like showing my videos very much. And with that being said, let's jump straight into the rise and fall of licensed games. Licensed games have had quite a far-reaching history in the medium, basically being around since the very first spike of video games. The main focus at this time, and for years to come, was basically just to use this interactive medium to promote new blockbuster films to kids, and to say the least, it worked. This technique really began in the early 80s, with Star Trek, Alien, and then the infamous E.T. Only a couple years into the start of this niche of games, disaster struck, as this absolute abomination of a game put not only film tie-in games, but also games as a whole on the brink of destruction. E.T. caused the infamous video game crash of the 80s, as it epitomized how saturated the market was becoming, with weak attempts to snatch money from the pockets of exhausted parents. But despite this niche causing catastrophe so quickly, it by no means warded off money-hungry studios from using every single ounce of their characters and their films to make money, and that includes making video games. Over the rest of the 80s, 79, yes, 70 fucking 9 movie tie-in games were made. Name literally any Hollywood movie from this time, and there is 100% a tie-in game. Star Wars, yep. Rocky, of course. Gremlins, Back to the Future. They somehow made 4 Back to the Future games out of 3 films. Rambo, Highlander, Ghostbusters, The Karate Kid, Halloween, Tron, Indiana Jones, The Goonies, Predator, Batman, Bill and Ted, even Howard the motherfucking Duck got a tie-in game. And this is a trend that wouldn't end. It was the rule, every movie got a tie-in game, and that rule lasted for another 2 decades. But we'll get to that later. Although the 90s didn't see any kind of downturn in the churning out of these games, they did see something else, something more important, a rise in quality. As time went on, these games began to be looked at as more than just extra advertising for their respective movies. They were starting to be seen as products in themselves, and with that, major studios put a lot more time, effort, and money into them, an investment that paid off big time, as the genre continued to grow and grow and grow until 1997. With the Nintendo 64 released, the games industry was seeing sights that were never before thought to be possible, and so when Rare were called up and asked to make a game to tie into the newest 007 film, they dropped this. And whilst yeah, it may not look too great compared to other games of the time, like Doom and Wolfenstein, to say the least, this shit slapped. It fucking slapped. It slapped so hard that this one shooter can be argued to be the best licensed game of all time. However, as Y2K passed, as we survived another few years, a new subgenre popped up within this already minor part of the industry. One that took the world by storm. Simpsons Games. If you had to completely sum up the 90s and 2000s in just a few words, the words The Simpsons would be pretty high on the list. So without a doubt, 20th Century Fox knew they needed to capitalize on this phenomenon ASAP. Despite a few mediocre games centered around the show coming out throughout the 90s, the most famous Yellow family on TV hit an uninterrupted 6-year stretch of success after the release of Road Rage in 2001. A hit immediately, that along with The Simpsons skateboarding a year later, began creating waves in the industry. But it was in 2003 that Fox and Vivendi truly hit gold with the release of the now iconic Simpsons Hit and Run. Essentially acting as GTA for every kids whose parents were, responsible, Hit and Run struck absolute gold, showing what licensed games could truly be, not just fun add-ons, but iconic and great games in their own right, with the game still being raved about to this day. By the way, anyone listening at Disney, because for whatever reason Disney own The Simpsons now, please can we get a remaster of this? Please, I think it's about time. I mean, SpongeBob got one. Can we please get just a little itty bitty Hit and Run remaster? It'd really be appreciated. It would make a fuck ton of money, and we all know that Disney loves their fucking money. However, it was only 4 years after this absolute miracle that the final true Simpsons game would be released, 2007's The Simpsons Game, far and away the most underappreciated and underrated licensed game. The Simpsons Game, widely seen as disappointing on its release, despite having some brilliant elements, marked somewhat of a turning point for licensed games as a whole, but we'll get to that. And yes, I know, my hair has a complete life of its own, it's truly grown up in the world. And it's just out the shower, so just ignore it. Because first, we gotta mention some of the absolutely underrated gems of the 2000s, at least when it comes to licensed games. Firstly, these aren't exactly underrated, but the tie-in games for Spider-Man 1 and of course Spider-Man 2 are absolutely phenomenal, as they were the first signs of superhero games truly being great. Star Wars also provided some absolute bangers during this time too, with the Revenge of the Sith game and of course the original Battlefronts. The Spongebob games, as mentioned earlier, although heavily based on nostalgia, were still quality. The Harry Potter franchise too brought us games that, although themselves were often broken or clunky, consistently had a charm, an energy about them that truly felt connected to the world of Harry Potter. This especially went for the Order of the Phoenix game, which is far and away the most underrated gem, if not masterpiece of a game of all time, and if you disagree, you're objectively wrong and you need to get out, because Order of the Phoenix, that's a game that needs a remaster. Fuck anything else. Fuck Simpsons Hit and Run. Give us a Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix remaster, and I don't know, I'll pay money for it, I guess. I mean, oh yeah, and there was also a fuck ton of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle games, with the peak of course coming with the most underrated film of all time, TMNT 2007. Shout out Z Collins, make a fucking channel bro. But as I said before, it was really 2007 that was the turning point for licensed games as a whole. The sheer volume of movie tie-ins was never higher, and we saw not only some of the best movie tie-ins, but some of the worst. Spider-Man 3 threw the franchise off a cliff, the B-movie game existed, and like I said, the Simpsons game didn't get near enough the respect and adoration that it deserved. General audiences were beginning to see through the marketing plans of these major studios. Yes, there were some great games coming out, but they were buried under heaps of purely for-profit trash, and audiences became more protective over their wallets. It was really between 2008 and 2012 that this genre truly died, however, as the massive oversaturation of the medium reached a fever pitch, and to put it very simply, people stopped buying them. So many people had been turned off by movie tie-ins, turned off by licensed games, as they had been burned one too many times. As per usual with this genre, over this time there was tens if not hundreds of licensed games released, and despite the likes of X-Men Origins Wolverine being better than the film it's based off, despite The Force Unleashed, despite the Kung Fu Panda game, despite some genuinely quality entries and also true masterpieces with the Arkham series, it still wasn't enough. And I think the fact that we got a movie tie-in game for M. Night Shyamalan's fucking Avatar film pretty much embodies the issue here. Quality was dwindling, but more so, charm was dwindling. Despite usually not being great, these games had for so long provided a certain charm, with clear passion being put behind them despite the intentions of pure profit. But as we saw Harry Potter become a third-person shooter, as we saw The Simpsons sequel die, as we saw Star Wars go stale and GoldenEye get remastered as an absolutely shit Call of Duty clone, it was clear that the end was near. Bars. The MCU even threw a hand in, with almost every Phase 1 movie getting a tie-in game, to very, very mixed results. However, they saw their planned Avengers game go out the window, and by 2013, with the release of the Xbox One and PS4, it was clear that this genre was essentially dead in the water. Well, apart from a couple shit Amazing Spider-Man games, but let's not talk about those because there's way too many Spider-Man fanboys that love those games. I even kind of love those games. I have a copy. If anyone wants to buy it, hit me up. Only like £150. Some of the Amazon prices are ridiculous. I'm also going on a tangent. So what happened? I mean, yes, of course, these games took a complete nosedive quality-wise, but they were never exactly masterpieces of art. These studios still wanted to capitalize as much as possible, so why would they throw this genre out the window? Well, as a matter of fact, they didn't. They just went to something even more profitable: mobile games. It started with The Simpsons Tapped Out in 2012, and after the game launched to massive success, it was clear what the following trend would be. Why invest millions into major studios to develop console releases when you could make a quick iPhone game riddled with microtransactions for kids everywhere to spend their parents' credit cards on? Marvel threw a half-baked Iron Man 3 game onto the App Store, along with Strike Team Heroes. Harry Potter eventually revived itself with an absolute cash grab of a mobile game. The App Store was stuffed to the brim with TMNT, Spongebob, Lego games. Everything that was once made for kids to play on their PS2s was now made for kids to play on their iPads. And whilst the morality of constantly bombarding children with adverts for microtransactions is a little bit iffy, to say the least, it fucking worked as a business model. But at the same time, it's kind of a shame. Sure, we've had some quality major licensed games in recent years. Arkham Knight, Shadow of Mordor, Spider-Man PS4, and Jedi Fallen Order to name a few. But we've lost essentially all of the charm of those minor games in the early 2000s. I don't mean to sound like a 50-year-old talking about the good old days, but there was something so riveting about playing as your favourite movie characters, recreating those moments, and along with it, there was a charm to the unpolished AA games that never quite had a big enough budget, but always had people with enough passion. Sure, there was a lot of dog shit, but there was a lot of diamonds in the rough that stemmed from this completely corporate scheme. But now, every single console release that has any link to a licensed property is given a $200 million budget, and only the best dev teams. Which brings us on nicely to Square Enix's Avengers game. Now, although licensed games, despite largely dying, do still exist in small doses, this is truly where the fall of these games comes in. This game, no, that's wrong. This product is the embodiment of everything terrible about the cash cows of the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, without any of the positives, without any of the charm. The Avengers is without a doubt in my mind purely being made to capitalize on the uncomparable hype of the MCU in the last decade, and they're not exactly being subtle about it. Instead of building off a completely unique set of characters based off some kind of comic, like in the Arkham games or Spider-Man PS4, the Avengers has taken the cast of the MCU and warped them into knockoff versions of themselves, creating a cast that looked just enough like the MCU cast to sell copies, but not quite enough to get sued by Robert Downey Jr. As for the game itself, I mean, you just have to glance at it to see what it's being made for. It's built like Anthem, it's built like a mobile game. It looks like nothing more than a surface level excuse to use these characters to make a quick buck, without any of that true passion, that underdog energy present in the likes of Order of the Phoenix, Spider-Man 2, GoldenEye. Sure, maybe it's just me that's stuck in a pit of nostalgia here, but this genre of games, the niche that is licensed games, a niche that myself and thousands of others grew up on, is dying out. And it's a shame to see. We may see more Spider-Man games, we may see a Harry Potter RPG, but we will never see another TMNT 2007. We will never see another X-Men Origins Wolverine, a Star Wars Revenge of the Sith. We will never see another Order of the Phoenix, and in my opinion that's a true shame. A shame that I may be part of the last generation to grow up on the charm and on the hidden beauty of those money-making games. The games that would let you relive the films of your childhood. The games that you knew were terrible, that you knew were just for profit, but you loved them nonetheless. Thanks for watching. If you did enjoy, it'd really be appreciated and would really help me out if you could hit like. And if you're new here and want to see more content like this, make sure to subscribe and turn notifications on, because like I said at the start of the video, YouTube doesn't like showing my videos very much. Also, comment down below and talk to me about the licensed games you grew up on. Is there any that I didn't mention here that you adored and that you wish would make a return? With all that being said, I've been Joe, aka Found a Scarab, and I'll see you in the next one.